and I know Evan mentioned this briefly in a previous video, I think our Boston reaction video, like he threw it out there. Who played Red's Roomba better?
Well, Star of Indiana, unfortunately, by no fault of their own. That was Star of Indiana was such an important part of my career. I had aged out at Vanguard the year before, and it was my first teaching job. And this group was, used to winning or being at the top of kind of the DCI, pedigree. And Hannum, Tom Hannum is such a great mentor to me because he's like, yeah, write the exercise, do some stuff. And he was really tuned in to, modernize some things that we're doing. So, and I was 21 years old. In those days, you didn't have the bonus year. If I had a bonus year, I would have marched. So I was teaching, and yeah, we were writing crazy stuff because I marched with Murray, and Red's Rumba had originated. Really, it was just a reaction. It was my own reaction video to March Mambo. It was really, the ditty, to talk like some history. The ditty hadn't been written yet. I mean, this was before that. 93 was a year after I'd aged out, so it was like, oh well, we should be doing something unique like that. But we gave the Star of Indiana zero minutes to work on it. I mean, maybe there was an assignment like in the winter, and we really never played it. We really never practiced it and played it. So I think it's an unfair kind of a thing because Boston, we had it in the program. I got motivated. I looked at myself. I said, I have to get off my ass here and like write something. And I kind of re-envisioned it, and then they practiced it. And so they were able to play it because we played it all the time. I mean, we never played Red's Rumba at Star of Indiana, or very little. So they did just fine for the amount of time that we played it, which was never.
There's like one YouTube video of them like working on it, and maybe it's after a show or something. And like one of the comments is like, "Oh, so this group actually was human. That's good to know." Just
yeah. Well, we spent, it's the Star of Indiana. Not to digress into ancient history, but Star of Indiana was like, we used to track. So our lot was really boring because you come and check us out, and we were marching around because, the drill demands were difficult, and everything was about making sure the brass and the timing and the ensemble, it was all about that. So we would just spend our warm up really preparing that stuff. So Red's Rumba, a lot of the stuff I'd written like a street beat and a difficult, etude like Red's. So we really didn't spend a lot of time on that after we got into move-in. But I learned my lesson. It's about learning. I'm learning every day, about my mistakes. You learn the most from the mistakes that you make. So for me, it was really about kind of looking at it and saying, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity because the lots might be better videoed. They might be more covered than even the shows. So I really thought about that way before we even got to move in. I said to myself, we got to do something more. I need to do something more because I kind of took that away from a lot of my drum lines where we really just focused on the show. So I think that in the future, I'm going to continue that because it was really an important decision that I should have been making for years, honestly.
It was certainly a hype. I feel like
I loved it.
Looking at the members performing that, I felt like it was a hype to them because it sounds and is hard.
Yeah,
right. It's really cool. So it's like you can just tell it's like this is hard, but it's also really good. So that makes it even better.
Yep.
But on a Star 93 note, my percussion instructor in high school turned me on to this. It has one of the tastiest tenor things that I recall. It's like I think it's the beginning of the drum break. It's like and then they just have that roll, and then I think the snares move on to that check it to get that rim stuff or whatever. But anyway, you got to rearrange that piece in 2013 when that came up. Were you just like, all right, let's go?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I wasn't really on board. That was 2013, I think.
Yeah.
George Hopkins, who was really the program coordinator at that time at Cadets, and all the time at Cadets, and Jay Bocook, they had a vision for taking Medea and combining with Adagio for strings, and there was like this kind of duality in that piece. And I remember thinking, I don't really know how we're going to do this better. But then I realized that really no one was playing that style. So I really did try to emulate the style of Star. in a lot of ways. This like dramatic, dynamic range and
Ambers
transparency
everywhere.
And it wasn't a lot of notes, but the notes count, you know. So a lot of it's interesting. People ask me a lot of times like about style, and to me it's like being a session drummer. It depends on what the music's doing, right? It depends on what the music requires. And when you're playing Medea, you know, you have an ostinato going, so you have to have that going. And then it's sort of like these riffs or these transparent figures that are happening. And we were running like crazy. You know, it was a typical Jeff Zatic drill. We were running all over the place. And yeah, it was a really neat to kind of go back in, because I really didn't want to do it at first, but it was fun to re-envision it. And there's a lot of what Star did a generation later. That was really how I approached it, because that piece was all about hearing every note. So that was kind of how we wrote it.
I loved it. I loved it. Such a callback, and obviously you being involved in both pretty heavily. I was like, this is going to do it justice. So
I beefed up the tenor parts a little bit, though.
Yeah.
No, the tenor parts, it was really funny because I was a tenor player myself, and I was teaching primarily the tenors in full battery at Star. And, you know, people weren't really that, to tell you the truth about Star, we used to get booed. You know, I remember being in Bloomington, Indiana. If Jim Ancona listens to this podcast, I'm going to shout out to him, my partner in crime. And he was teaching the pit. In those days, he had a very small staff. And we remember coming off the field. In those days, we would kind of go and review. And we came off the field at Bloomington, our home show. We were getting booed because the show was very uncomfortable. You know, it was a very different type of programming for what drum corps was doing then. And I don't think that the kids in the drum line knew at that point. If you went mid-season and interviewed the members of the drum line, they would not have been able to tell you, "Oh yeah, we're going to win drums," because you didn't have any understanding that type of drumming would work. And you know, you have to give Tom Hannum total credit, because for him it was about the music, and that was a time in drum corps when the music really could be a priority above all else. And when we went back to answer your question, when we went back in 2013 and did it, it was fun to go back and try to create that low level transparency. And yeah, I'm talking to you guys right now, I wish we could have a piece that did that again, because if the music calls for it, it's really a unique way to have a melodic drum line out there on the field, where it's low level stuff, where you're really hearing all these things regardless of where you are on the field. It's why history is important.